Good morning. My name is Gary Lopes, and I work for the Innovation, Engineering, and Technology Group here aboard the Battleship Iowa in San Pedro, California. Today I'm going to give you a quick tour of the ship's transmitter room located on the third deck just off of Broadway. This is literally the voice of the Iowa. Many people don't realize that once a ship got beyond the horizon, it was deaf, dumb, and blind without radio communications. And this is where the transmitter side of that communications took place. Here in this room, we have a variety of different transmitters, transceivers, and communications equipment. To start with, we have a group of HF transmitters that cover 2 to 30 megahertz. These are URT-23 transmitters, and they're comprised of 3 different pieces. Up above, there's an exciter, which is the synthesizer and low-level RF transmission. These are used to set the frequency, and then that low-level signal, about 100 milliwatts, is transported down to the power amplifier, which is directly below it. Now, these power amplifiers have 2 major tubes in them, 4 CX 15,000 Bravos, and these were used to produce about 1,500 watts of RF power out of each one of these amplifiers. They could produce that 1.5 kilowatts of power 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and that's just the way that they were operated when the Navy had the ship active. Most of these transmitters were on the air, either with a dead carrier as a signal or transmitting some sort of messages, either voice or teletype. Both of these systems are now operated by this huge power supply that sits down below. It's about 150 pounds just for the power supply alone. So each one of these was capable of operating, as I said, 24/7, and down here in the transmitter room, if we had all of these transmitters going, it would be almost deafening to hear the noise. Each one of the transmitters would have been hooked to one of the ship's big antennas located either forward or aft on the ship. Those would come into these big tuners here. These are just like the tuners that many amateur radio operators use on their transceivers. They're actually built into those transceivers. Here in the Iowa, we have these big manually tuned systems. You can see there's a bank of 4 of these in each one of these racks. And what it allowed the system to do was to provide an antenna connection to 4 of these transmitters simultaneously. So in other words, to say it, 1,500 watts on each one of these tuners to a single antenna simultaneously. So each one of these would have been tuned to a specific frequency or a channel that would be used again for teletype communication or voice. You can see that we have them all lined up here. They all go to individual different types of antennas, like the disc cone, the twin whip, or the cage portion of the cone, and so on. Now each one of these tuners would have been terminated on this patch panel right here. And this allowed us to hook either any of these specific transmitters up to a particular tuner and antenna. And the way this would work is that, for instance, transmitter number 11 comes out of this big cable. It hooks up to this panel right up here. You can see the connector right here. There's both an RF connector as well as a DC connector for the interface of the information. And then you would slide it in here and then push it on, and that would connect it to one of the transmitters on the other side. Now, there is one unique tuner on board, and that's this unit here, the URA-38 tuner. It is a fully automatic tuner, and it hooks up to its own antenna on the port side, just a vertical antenna, but it also covers 2 to 30 megahertz. It just happens to be located above transmitter number 11 here. But with this tuner, you can simply tune it up and operate on any frequency from 2 to 30 without any intervention on one of the manual systems behind you. Okay, so in addition to all the HF transmitters, we also have a whole stack, 16 of them to be exact, of these Whiskey 3 transceivers, WSC3s. These were used for communication in the 225 to 400 megahertz band and would be used for voice or teletype, plus phase code modulation for special teletype information. Most of it was all classified so it would have been fully scrambled. Each one of these is capable of about 100 watts AM or FM, and would be used not only for regular communication, ship to ship or ship to air, but also from satellite. So it would have been connected to the Fleet Satcom network that had been operating in the late 70s to the early 80s. Many of those satellites are still active on the air. So these were all used, again, 24/7 by the ship, and they would have been set up on specific channels with constant information going on out through them. In addition to those, they also had specific tuners that would allow 4 of these transceivers to be hooked up to a single antenna. And that's what these big coupler systems are right here. So you can see there's a lot of them. All the way down here are the UHF transceivers, plus there's a couple right behind the camera there. And then finally, we have a couple of other radio systems that were on board. Many people know that the ship originally had a heliport where we had helicopters landing aft on the ship. This would be the radio that would be used to communicate with the helicopters as they were approaching the ship. This is standard avionics equipment that would cover the 108 to 136 aviation band in AM modulation. And the control tower that the ship had aft above the heliport would have used this radio to talk to the helicopters. And then the ship also had a whole contingencies of Marines. The Marines were sort of like the policemen of the Iowa, and they had their own radio network, and that was these radios here. They were used to operate on the 30 to 88 megahertz band using FM modulation, and would have been used for not only aboard the ship, but ship to ship as well. So that's what these radios here are capable of doing. So I should also say that most of these radios have all been restored and are operational. We typically use the URT-23s to talk to other radio amateurs every few months when we're either testing the system or have a special event. And we get on the air using the legacy equipment, as we call it, and work radio amateurs all over the country using the call sign November Echo 6 Papa Mike. So I'm glad you came to visit the transmitter room today. I appreciate it, and we look forward to having you visit the Iowa sometime. Thanks.